This is the nameless protagonist. If you guys can hear this clearly, do go ahead and press 1 in the chat for me, for those that are here. Excellent. I see 1. All right. This is a bit of an impromptu stream today. I hadn't originally planned at all to have a discussion. I was going to save everything for tomorrow. I see that, Senku. Konbanwa. I just wanted to sit down and have a bit of a chop-up session. I haven't decided if I'm going to hold an open dojo today. I may. But more importantly, or most importantly, I just kind of wanted to present these ideas because I think they'll serve as a recurring theme for what I plan on talking about tomorrow and what I plan on speaking about in a general sense going forward. I think this is the direction I want to take things. But before I even get to any of that, let me go ahead and formally open the dojo. Firstly, to the founders of the space. Os. For those of you in the chat, in the playback. Os. To the dojo. Os. This is the nameless protagonist. This evening is an interesting one for those of you familiar with the occult, or just spiritual modality in general. And I'd like this to be a kind of recurring tone for some of the topics I want to speak about tonight. If you guys have looked at the description, I left it relatively vague, but it centers around this idea of new beginnings within a beginning. The kanji that is in the brackets for the title of this episode. Chimangetsushoku. Chimangetsushoku. It is a blood moon lunar eclipse this evening. And what's interesting about full moons in general is where they occupy in the general cycle. And as you know, in Japanese, well, for many of you, the various phases of the moon correspond to different days that they're acknowledged. And the full moon is known as mangetsu. You'd likely know that if you paid attention to Bleach, as a lot of Ichigo's techniques are named after and are inspired by the various phases of the moon. And for those who have a simple understanding of the kanji, chi does mean blood, and shoku representing that eclipse. But that's the event taking place here tonight. I think if you're in Central Time like I am, you should be able to see it around 1:26 a.m. is when it begins in earnest. And you should start to see a partial eclipse starting to take place now. So there's a lot of interesting energy in the air at the moment. And I just want to make use of that. If you guys are feeling it, I'll definitely open up the panel. Just make your intention known in the chat, and we can go from there. But it's in taking advantage of that spirit of being at a high point and finding a place of renewal. I think that's applicable now. there are a lot of things that are taking place, specifically for those of you who are in the Northern Hemisphere here in America right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of preconceived ideas that have a lot of baggage affiliated with them. I think the objective behind my content and my presence here in the first place is to offer you an intellectual social software to assist you in extrapolating usefulness in different ways, given that we are in a different phase of information availability and information mobility. I don't think that most cultures have done a very good job in providing tools to deal with what happened purely off the internet alone, let alone what we're seeing now with the mighty power of the algorithm and its capacity and ability to not only transform the definition of power, but the way you perceive the information you get access to in the first place by circumventing your critical thinking. That is definitely going to be a topic I plan on revisiting. And it'll be important when I get in tomorrow about the nature of power and as it relates to the doctrine I'm writing now. But before we get started and really begin with today's first theme, I want to make some acknowledgments. We've got first one in here today, Y'all Borgen. That name is never going to not be hilarious to me every time I see it. Os. I don't know if you're here now, but I appreciate the shout out earlier, fam. We got Toya. Os. Glad to have you. Detroit 0861. Os. Good to see you, fam. We got Sinku. Konbanwa. Sinku Ishigami, more specifically. Hope you're doing well, fam. Joe's. Os. What's good? Sheed, we here. Always glad to see you, fam. Os. We got Lust Infinity. Os. Or LXST. You gotta let me how you want me to. Gotta let me know how you want me to say your name. What's going on, fam? Os. Vincent John Doom. Os. Gyogami. Os. Or I should say Mbote Mpangi. Passport OG. Os. Managing Life's Risk. Os. Drew Main. Os. I see you too, fam. Kurenzin Iaren. Os. Oh, he's spelling out the kanji. Yep. You know, there's a funny story about that kanji and how it applies to that whole story about the snake god eating the sun and then ultimately eating the moon and ultimately eating Earth. We're gonna have to do a archetype stream one day and really get a lot of the subject matter experts to really dig into a lot of these very interesting myths. I'm just way too reminded with many kanji and what I see in Sanskrit and hieroglyphs. Very, very interesting rhyming that happens there. Red Lion, ESV, Os. I am here, fam. Indeed. My brother says, we've been waiting for another installment of the Blade meditation. I'm going to do these more often, man. I always talk myself out of not doing these because I'm not a fan of doing anything and I don't have an organized structure, but I always have a lot of these concepts I like thinking about. And if somebody doesn't call me and I do a rant that way, you know, it'll never make it onto the internet. And I guess I can use this as a kind of litmus test to see who's interested in some of these conversations. And I won't say they're off brand, but they may be off topic relative to the rest of the space overall as it pertains. Let's see. Ishigami says there was a guy in this space similar to who used to talk about the adopting the happy heart of the shinobi. He describes it as Nippon Ikan. I like the idea of the general kanji for shinobi, the two blade yaiba and kokoro. I break down some of those sometimes when I have a general conversation, general topics, and I'll usually dedicate a whole live stream to the idea because I think they're useful concepts that are largely missing in a lot of Western modality as it's presented to us philosophically. So between the religion piece and what we get in school, we don't really get a lot of that depth outside of what you might get from some cultural importing. But for me, really getting into the nature of kanji and the meaning behind it, again, it just rhymes so much with the way I learned hieroglyphs that I can't help but, again, identify how much they rhyme with each other. Indeed, Gyogami. Kokoro no yaiba. Yep. The heart and the blade. And even the concept of kokoro is in and of itself just interesting. The idea of the heart mind and how that again reminds me of the ka and ba. But we can get to that another day. Yes, Kirigakure Jones. He's one of the members of the Black Ronins. And it's him and I believe it's Sigma Jones also. Yeah, those brothers, they're doing their thing. I haven't talked with them in a while. Probably got to send them a message eventually, see how they're doing. But yeah, there's definitely kind of an undertone of interest in some of these concepts, and I'm surprised it's not talked about more. So I'll definitely keep these blade meditations in mind if they're really you guys' speed, and we can really dig into a lot of these concepts. Like I said, there's some book readings I want to do going forward, and I'll be kind of scraping the surface on some of them. Oh, Samurai-san, indeed. I did an interview with them. It was really great brothers there. I want to make sure I get Rain Fire Designs. Os. But I suppose we could get started. So press a 1 in the chat for me if you have seen my latest installment of the Dokkodo series, which was Precept 18. Or if you're even aware I'm covering that series. Okay, we do got one. So maybe I'll ask a better question. Okay, so a couple people have seen it. We've got how many? 19. So press a 2 if you'd like for me to play it so we can have a bit of a refresher. And we'll use that as a lead into the rest of the conversation. Touch some of the other points and then have an open dojo. Okay. We got a few. Okay. I'll go ahead and pull it up, get a link to it real quick, and we will go from there. Give me just a moment. And so you know, when you head over to my channel, if you go to the playlist section, I do have all my collaborations I've done under guest appearances. Yume is where I do a lot of my fictional writing that I've translated over to, I guess, voice recording. The live streams, which are under the Hidden Village tab, then my topic specific pre-records are under Makimono or scrolls. And then the way is where I have all of my Budo content. It's going to be the Dokkodo first, but I'll definitely be going over much more in the very near future. Let me get this here to the newest one. And I will share screen and we'll go from there. Let me go to present. Share screen. There we go. Can you guys see that? Let me turn down some of the ambience so you guys can properly hear it. Banner, media asset. All right. Can you guys see this? And of course, my connection wants to be disrespectful. Is the volume okay for that? Mi ni itara no mono, mi ni kaki no koto, 18番目の美味しいDokkodo, Miyamoto Musashi. I will elaborate this precept. Admittedly, I had a many great deal of issues with this precept. In my search for answers, I delved many tomes, scrolls, densho, opinions of various practitioners of the way, and came to a deep realization. This isn't talking about material things, at least not in the Western sense. This is a matter of the way. The literal translation of the original script was overseen by New Zealand professor Alexander Bennett and reinterpreted as, quote, "Do not seek to possess either goods or fiefs for your old age." Okay, can you guys hear this okay? Go ahead and press a 1 if you can hear it, and I'll go ahead and continue a bit and interject when I need to. Okay, cool. We will continue. The way he arrived at this conclusion seems to have a great deal to do with the political environment from which he came, the context through which he adopted the Budo, and the sentiment at the time of Eastern and Western cultural modalities at play. In short, a first industrial Western capitalistic orientation. Having been ignorant of the original translation, I was left bewildered. I couldn't understand why this spirit seemed to interrupt the flow of both the Gorin no Sho and virtually all other previous precepts within the Dokkodo. The answer was in a very obvious and simple undertone, which has served as a theme for this entire time. It was reinforcing a point made in the Gorin no Sho, the book for which this appendix, the Dokkodo, was intended to be a companion for. Miyamoto Musashi said, quote, "To know one way is to know 10,000, end quote. And understanding the way broadly, it can apply to the many myriad things under heaven. This should sound familiar. It was touched upon in a previous precept. What is being described is the Tao of existence, the nothing from which something manifested, Mu, to become the one, Ichi, which became the myriad 10,000 things, Bun. From those 10,000 things, they can be returned to the one, and from that one, nothingness is once again realized. This is the path with no name, the nameless way, or the way, Michi. This stands in the shadow of minimalism and ikigai, extending beyond simple resourcefulness. The idea is that one focuses less on what one doesn't have and more so on the abundance of what all the 10,000 things under heaven can become, at least should one be of proper mind to utilize it. To enforce this point, we will use an example from Miyamoto Musashi's life. So the key here is to understand where this is about to lead to. It's a mindset that's being described here. And pay attention to the context of the story because it's going to feed into what we'll talk about next and why I chose this situation with Miyamoto Musashi's final recorded duel that generally is known about before he began writing the Gorin no Sho. At the height of his dueling years, around age of 30, Miyamoto Musashi faced what is likely his most popular and skilled opponent, Sasaki Kojiro. He is known for his skill with the great katana known as the Nodachi, affectionately nicknamed Monohoshizao, or the clothes-drying pole. There were many threads of speculation as to how Miyamoto Musashi ended up less than an hour before the duel without katana or wakizashi, but that ended up being the case. In turn, just before landing at the island where the duel was to take place, he fashioned from a boat oar a wooden sword. Sasaki Kojiro would go on to be defeated in a single strike by Musashi, and the rest is history. At the time, he did not concern himself with not having, quote, proper armaments, end quote, nor did he concern himself with things that had nothing to do outside of the immediate situation. He addressed only that which mattered at the moment, his understanding of the long sword, and a medium through which to express it. Sorekiri da. If you understand the way within oneself, realizing the way in all things becomes that much easier. Operating at a higher modality of being, the material becomes less of a focus, and the energy which animates them becomes your new abundance. In other words, for the one who walks alone, things that do not reach the body do not concern the body. Os. So that was the whole essence behind it. This idea that even if one doesn't necessarily have the most ideal of scenarios, that if you've acquired a mastery and understanding of the way things are, of a way, if you've attained some measure of, I'm not going to use the term greatness, but aptitude in a way that you are skillful beyond the average and better than the way you were the day before, and endeavor to understand a way, you can find a way. At that point in time, Musashi quite literally had no weapon and was about to fight his most difficult fight in his known recorded history. There were so many people there that were on that island to watch this fight. He had government officials. There were people from rival schools. There were opportunities of individuals there scouting for him to eventually become a samurai assigned to a lord. Because as you know, with Musashi, his whole thing was, for as good as he was as a swordsman, he was hired on and off again over and over so much that it kind of sprouted this meme, this axiom associated to, you know, 7 times a Ronin, 8 times a samurai. In other words, the idea is that you're supposed to go from place to place to place until you figure out where you should be, essentially ending your career. And for those who don't know, he almost ended up being hired by Tokugawa Ieyasu, but instead a rival group ended up serving as the master swordsman for that daimyo, the Yagyu clan. And in the very near future, we're going to cover one of the more famous Yagyu clan members, Yagyu Munenori, who was around at the very same time Musashi was, but the two never fought. And it was due to Yagyu Munenori and his particular school of Itoryu, which ends up becoming Shinkageryu, that becomes Japan's official swordsman or koryu style that you can see to this day. And it's one of the only fully surviving styles of swordsmanship that was from this era that continued onwards. It'll be interesting to compare the mindsets. But to tie it back, even if he didn't have a sword and he was fighting Sasaki Kojiro, who was argued to be a phenom, he developed a technique. I believe it was the famous swallow cutter technique, Tsubame Gaeshi. He would practice cutting swallows with that big ass sword and was skilled at it to the point where he could do it faster than most people could do it with a bow and arrow or a dagger. He was an entire meme. And Musashi shows up late to the duel. He takes the knife of the person that rode him there on that boat, cuts the boat oar into the shape of a sword, and beats dude in a single strike. There's a lesson in that. I see our story and our demographic in the Edo social complex. I see us doing this all the time, and not just our everyday lives, but in sports and damn near everything. To become so good at something, to fail at something so much that you can't fail, is essentially the essence of that. But I want to get into what prompted me to want to lead with this today. And it was a very common act, not common. This particular clip is becoming more common now because it's making its rounds through social media. But I wanted to validate the point that he made, but contextualize it. Because I really do think it is something that gets downplayed a little bit too much. And we'll get to that now. But before we do, we got a couple new people that came in. Let me go ahead and make some quick acknowledgments before we continue. Jay Moore, I don't know if I got you earlier, but os. Okay, Ari is here, the fitness mom. Os, hope you're doing well. We got Complex. Complex Design of the Futurist Guild. What's going on, fam? You might like this one, man. If you got time, go ahead and stick around. I'm probably going to do an open dojo. I think you're going to like this idea of Muzen that I get into later on. It is definitely related to the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We got the Quiet Storm here, man. Os, fam, it's good to see you. Glad you can make it. He said Bruce Wayne, aka Dusty King. Os, what's good, fam? And Smitty just showed up. Os, glad you can make it, man. Oh, and I saw your last post. Those swords were pretty interesting. They look Sungay Empire-tastic. but you know, the Moors did a lot of importing. That's what I'll say. A whole lot of importing. Okay, let's get to this clip here, and we're going to go over it. It's about a minute long. Also, fair use, fair use, fair use.
I've been in the business 24 years, right? And I've seen people go from nothing to the biggest stars in the world. I've seen people go from one role to winning Academy Awards and doing all this shit. And what I realized yesterday thinking about it, we're lying to our kids, dog. And I think that's a big problem in our community. We tell our kids that and this is fresh on my heart. Like I literally just came to this conclusion last night. We tell our kids if they do right and they make the good grades and they go to the programs and they will become successful. If you work hard enough, your work will be paid off. And that's not true. Success is given. It's not earned.
Point one here. I think a lot of people have found themselves in general in agreement with this statement. And I think this is extremely important to have a understanding of. What he's describing overall, especially as he continues, is a kind of commercial success. And what's interesting is we disproportionately crowd these areas of, I'm going to say, finality relative to the number or percentage of our population. We overcrowd these areas of extreme acceptance. And it's exceptional in that sense. Almost in a way that a lottery is. And it's interesting to consider this because for all intents purposes, we shouldn't be overcrowding these areas like that, but we do so because there isn't a system that can provide the consistency, which is where you would get power from. I think he is describing a symptom of a much bigger issue. And it's this lottery-based interfacing with reality and eschewing systems because we've not really invested in institution and being so skilled as individuals that we can disproportionately crowd these areas where, generally speaking, fractions of a fraction of a percentage of people should even be at. It's an interesting phenomenon to observe because even with that said, for our disproportionate presence in these fields relative to our population, we still aren't in the business of owning and controlling when it comes to these things, which again shows a lack of understanding systems. But again, we're talking about commercial success. And this commercial success, as we understand it from the Industrial Revolution's perspective, which is a very superficial kind of metric to measure yourself by. And it's really kind of what I want to get at today. We're seeing that these measures of success may not even be everything they're cut out to be. And overall, we sacrifice almost everything to get there. I'm going to let the brother finish, and then we'll get to where I want to really take this.
Because you can be the most brilliant. If one person don't tap you, each one of y'all. There were people who could hit harder, who could catch better, who could run faster. But somebody said, you're the one. And the other 50 behind you fell off. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And because of that, I don't know what that emotion or that feeling is the scary thing. Because I went to all the programs. I've done Broadway. I've done off-Broadway. I've been in the business 24 years. I've been in 2 Academy Award films. I've done independent films. I've done major motion pictures. Now I'm Captain America. So now what?
Hold up.
And there it is. So now what? That whole idea of being lonely at the top is one angle. But for all that he's accomplished, for all that he's done, there's still the acknowledgement of just reaching that pinnacle of fame, physically being there, still isn't enough. There's still a system involved. There's still this matter of power. And he labeled it as success. And I do think that there's a kind of misnomer to that. Toya, you can cite me on grammar on that. I think there's a bit of a caveat. For this idea of success, what does that really actually mean? On one end, he's exactly what some people strive for and never actually reach. But then if he defines that by way of the Oscar, what does that Oscar actually mean? It's initiation into a club. And when I look at this, to use a contemporary example, the first person that comes to mind is Cat Williams. Didn't he just finish essentially getting blackballed by the very same group of individuals Anthony Mackie was talking about just now? He went through an immaculate effort, a monumental effort consistently for years, damn near having an expose campaign and demonstrating the definition of show your work. Like if show your work was a person, Cat Williams would be right there as a stamp. And he 100% is highlighting a lot of those major points there. You can have all of these things, but if you don't have a measure of power, which, you know, it's not going to be handed to you unless you've got the leverage for it, or if it's handed to you by charity, we're going to talk a bit about that. There's more steps to that process. There's way more steps to that process. You get there as a result of creating a system. But if you're there operating under shadow contracts and trying to just go off of charity, off of, look, I did the work, here's this merit currency I want to present to you, include me. It's a choice for them because you're talking about power. And I found that almost everything this technically does apply to, which really brings the question once more of what is the definition of win, success, victory? What do these things actually mean? I think that, again, the Industrial Revolution has given us a very narrow definition of these things. These markers by way of what you own materially, maybe a particular career or some sort of award that demarcates this. I don't want to downplay these things, but I think there's a difference between these things being goals to sort of reach for versus things that you define yourself by versus things that really are meant to provide you substance and to be sufficient to sustain you. I think a lot of us run ourselves ragged trying to pursue these things and define ourselves by things that we aren't even really a part of. We're really just participating in a kind of charity with regards to that. None of us own Hollywood. None of us own the algorithms that determine whether or not your content even shows. None of us own the studios that will put these things forward to make that happen to where we could consistently be in the front page. You can juxtapose that to a Nollywood or a Bollywood. You can even juxtapose that to anything you see in across Asia overall. For all that's said and done, it's still being controlled by a few people who have acquired power, centralize themselves a certain way, and are the individuals that determine who gets into the system. It works like that for most people in their jobs. It works like that for most people in their opportunities. Hell, right now, if you wanted to become a doctor, medical school only has but so many positions. That's actually a major critique right now with the healthcare system. And what's goofy is, let's say right now you did want to become a doctor. Those 500 slots that are available, damn what your scores are, that's who you're compared against. You could have a damn near perfect score. The difference between someone getting in and someone not could be the dotting of an I, the crossing of a T. And understanding that it takes so much skill to even get to the point where you can score that high on the test, given the general population. Let's say out of every several million, there's only 10,000 people that score that high. I mean, to only have 500 slots available for that particular time period for 10,000 people is absolutely setting talent on fire. But that could be the difference between people making it or not. That's not an issue with you. That's an issue with the way the system is set up. So you either have to change the system or make your own. What's happening to all of that undergraduate talent that's not being utilized because they didn't make it into pre-med? What happens to those students? They still got livings they got to make. Yeah, Inspired Truth said, you know, even after middle school, even after medical school, you still have to get a residency. Fam, indeed. And there's slots for that you still have to compete with. It's hyper competitive. And it's got nothing to do per se on what's going on with you. I mean, we'll use a more contemporary example as well, man. Like, imagine if Nelly came out now in this environment. Take any C rated, I guess I'm dating myself. Take any C rated artist from 95 to 2001 and put them in today's music environment. I mean, I think the talent expression is night and day. But again, it's designed by system to be that way. There's a system connected to that. You don't get there purely for working hard. But again, we're talking about commercial success. Commercial success. It's why I really wanted to get into this idea of Katsu to win or victory. It's the Japanese kanji that's translated to, quote, win. And it's really a compound kanji, just a lot like how the hieroglyphs work. It's a bunch of other sub kanji that come together to form the main one. Let me get a post for you real quick on what it looks like so I can type it in the chat for you. It's in the description. 1 second. Channel. We're going to go here. There it is. All right. Sucks because it's not going to blow this up. It'll be a little hard to see. Katsu. And yes, that is appreciated. If you guys can, as soon as you come in, go ahead and click like if you see fit to do so, and subscribe if you haven't already. There's been people saying that whenever I go live or when I post something, a lot of people don't get a chance to see it. So be sure to double check you got the bell on there. But I wanted to read an insert from one of the books I'll be reading in the near future. It is called Budo Shoshinshu, or On the Way of the Warrior by Daiduji Yuza. I can put a link to that book when I get a second. This particular book was essentially a kind of guide for many samurai during the Edo period who were seeking to find a retainer, to become retainers and find a lord that would hire them. So he presents to it a general way of being for the warrior. And I like these kinds of books because it's interesting seeing what they say back then in the 1600s and seeing how similar statements are being said now. And understanding that irrespective of the time period, fundamentally, you're still dealing with the same type of human being at the end of the day. But I'll go ahead and read from this. It is again the Budo Shoshinshu by Daiduji Yuzan. He writes here in the 14th chapter, titled, Surpass Others in Some Way. No matter how high or how low his rank, the man who would become a warrior must have a good understanding of the meaning of the character Katsu, or to win. More specifically, the character, quote, to win, Katsu, can also be read to excel. And in any case, a man who does not surpass others in some way cannot be said to be a good warrior. For example, if a man were to spend long years putting effort into learning all the martial arts and yet did not become a master of those arts, he would have excelled others if he could at least be thought of as generally skillful. In serving his lord, on the other hand, if a man goes beyond many of his companions and has discharged his duties well in the eyes of all, he is said to have served in a way that has excelled others. Above all, at times of altercation on the battlefield, to think of advancing when others are doing so, or to make a stand along with others, is neither very impressive nor praiseworthy. But for a single man to advance when all his compatriots consider it impossible, or to hold his ground when the others cannot make a stand, it is the mark of a brave warrior who has excelled. Beyond these things, it is essential for a man to strive with all his heart and to understand that it is difficult even to reach the average if he does not have the intention of surpassing others in whatever he does. These are words for the understanding of those intending to be warriors. I think that captures the essence, this idea of overcoming the self to become something more than what you are. That's what's missing. That's the lack of fulfillment and sustenance that you just simply can't get because a title was handed to you, that you can't get simply because you've acquired fame, that you can't get because there's an object that represents this idea. I think there is a kind of, for lack of a better way of articulating, a kind of intersection between working hard to surpass the you of old and coming across those who would offer you an opportunity to become great. And it reminds me of another story. I'm only going to lightly brush on this and probably open up the panel because I didn't mean for this to go on almost an hour so far. Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Toyotomi Hideyoshi is known as one of the three great unifiers. He was a retainer of Oda Nobunaga, who was the first great, you should say, conqueror of Japan. He set the stage for Toyotomi Hideyoshi to do his thing and eventually for the Tokugawas to show up and do what they ultimately did throughout the entirety of the Edo period. What makes Toyotomi Hideyoshi so unique is that he was from such a low birth. He barely entered the class of samurai with regards to being an ashigari. In other words, he had to start from so far on the bottom that the idea that he could even register and get the attention of Oda Nobunaga, especially before he started his campaign, was so improbable that he had to go out of his way to demonstrate his usefulness. He was well known for not being a good swordsman. He really couldn't fight. But he gets known as being arguably one of the most powerful samurai in Japanese history. Arguably one of the most powerful figures known in Japan prior to World War II. And he did it by simply being the best possible retainer he could have. When Oda Nobunaga was forced to commit seppuku after his betrayal by, was it Akechi? I believe it was Akechi. One of his main generals that was supposed to assist him betrayed him. And that's the battle where he had to ultimately commit seppuku, end his life. And that's where Yasuke and all of them get spared their life and claims that, he was never really a samurai. So, he don't have to do that either. Toyotomi Hideyoshi was separated intentionally from Oda Nobunaga because of how diligent of a retainer he was. And it was because he was separate from Oda Nobunaga that he wasn't there to intervene and likely change the tide of battle. So he made it his personal vendetta to hunt down and completely and utterly unmake everybody responsible for setting up Oda Nobunaga. And he gained so much respect for doing that. He was immediately made daimyo of all Japan and became one of the most critical keys in uniting the entirety of the island and expanding even further onwards into Korea and other endeavors, all without lifting a sword. He had damn near no talent. He had nothing but his desire to serve. Before Oda Nobunaga even took him in as a retainer, Hideyoshi used to stalk his castle on the ambush outside of in the bushes and damn near ambush beg to get accepted. And it was on one particular day where he had sat there for 3 days in the rain and everything, just waiting for Oda Nobunaga to return. And basically doing whatever he could to be of service and usefulness. It got to the point where Nobunaga was just so amused, he just said F it and added him just to see what he would do. Just to see what he would do. Told him he would only get paid a third of what he was supposed to, and that he had to pretty much do all the work that nobody else wanted to do. And he gave him the nickname of Kozaru. So those of you familiar with Dragon Ball, especially Dragon Ball GT, you're familiar with this term Ozaru. Well, Ozaru translates to great ape. So the kanji ko means little. This man was being called little monkey by this dude for the whole time he was there. And if you look at any pictures of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, you'll see that he looks kind of goofy. He's kind of goofy looking. This man had absolutely nothing going for him conventionally and became undisputedly one of the most powerful samurai in history. It was a cross between hard work and opportunity, and understanding the system and being willing to engage in it in a way that puts you into that position. Had anything gone different, if he was any less diligent, he would have never stood out to Oda Nobunaga. But if Hideyoshi was not persistent with regards to the way he attempted to get his attention and tried to find ways of being useful and following the way of the samurai and not focus on what his shortcomings were and instead focus on what he could do and become a master of that, this fits the definition of Katsu, or to win. They were able to overcome themselves of old, the you of yesterday, for lack of a better term. It was through that he managed to find a way to move forward and win. I will put in the name of this book here real quick, and I'll go ahead and open up the dojo so you guys can come up and we can chop it up a little bit about this. But that's what I wanted to submit for you guys' consideration. I'm gonna put a link to the live stream in the banner. Let me start the banner real quick, or a pinned comment rather. Hold on. Firstly, the book. Okay, that's the book right there. And let me get you the link. All right, I got it pinned, so it should be up top there. Should be the starred comment. Let me know if that link works, and I will disengage this. Stop the share screen. There we go. Now I can have you guys up. But that's the essence of it. How in the world are we defining this idea of success? And is it sufficient enough to sustain us, even if we get these things? I'm thinking of a Will Smith interview where he had reached the pinnacle of all of these things. And for all that he had, his main point to say was the most valuable things to him were things that didn't have a price associated with it. They were things that money couldn't even buy, things that you already came into the world with, things that inherently can't be commoditized for all it's said and done. And I guess the value in that is taking time to really ask yourself, what in the world does that mean to you? What is that to you and for you? Complex, I see you. I'm going to add you in just a moment. Also, give me just a second to take care of this right here. I'm going to be right back. All right, I am back. And let me go ahead and add complex. Okay, quick mic check. You there, fam?
Yeah, man. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Os.
Os, how you doing, bro?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Let me see. Before I start that. Okay, I think I see it now. Encrypted. You said you left a message under the Dokkodo Precept 18. For some reason, I'm not seeing it now. You're more than welcome to retype what you had said, and I can revisit it in just a few moments. I see Inspirational Truth said something, and I think you made mention. Okay, you put a haiku here. Let me know if that's what you're referring to. But Complex, floor is all yours, fam. Go ahead. Os.
Yo, man. Shit. Hold on one second, dude. I dropped something. So I was just gonna mention something off of that video that you had played about the guy talking about success.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I've always found, dude? It's like success is something that's better. That is something that's better when it's self-defined and not like defined by other people, right? Because I think that's what he's talking about, dude. And I say like years ago, man, I kind of struggle with this a little bit. But there's what you define as like what like successful to you, and then there's like everybody else's like their idea of what success is. And a lot of times, dude, people get caught up chasing, like let's just say, like the society's model of success, and they end up finding themselves not fulfilled. Well, I did this. I checked all these boxes. I went here. I did that. You know, why do I feel like I haven't really accomplished much? And you know, it has more to do with this idea of fulfilling society's notion of what success is and not self-defining that.
I concur 100%. 100%. And it was why I wanted to get into this idea of Katsu and what the actual kanji means and how it really doesn't require anybody else to set the definition for that. I'm going to cover this in another precept, but I mean, how many times have you seen people lose because they won? You know what I'm saying? And what I mean by win is, you know, they achieve the standard everybody else is talking about. How they, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not talking about, you know, this idea of, all right, well, there's more to go conquer. No, I mean, like, because you've attained something that everybody else told you to get and not what you truly want, here you are. You know what I mean? We see this a lot. Yeah, we see this a lot now with people. And let me say this carefully. Those who have worked hard for career to the point where things they really wanted, which is family, end up passing them by as a result. So they've succeeded in having the career, they have the money, but now they have nothing to share it with.
You know, there's that one, and then there's basically I don't know what the term would be called, but essentially the ego gets inflated because I
say that again because you're kind of breaking up, I think. Just
all right, am I coming in okay now? Okay. No, I was saying a lot of times people's egos get inflated by quote unquote success, right? You know, so that has a so like again these notions or idea of success can oftentimes skew people's viewpoints or their actual reality. It can actually skew it, right? You know, you'll oftentimes hear like, oh, well, you know, I can't. It's like manosphere tropes, dude, with the dating and all that crap. But like the chicks go, I can't find a man on my level. Well, I'm successful and this and that. It's like, by whose measure? You know what I mean? Like, by whose measure? Who's determining this? Is this self-determined? And if it's self-determined, that kind of points to that ego modality that I'm talking about. Like, dude, like your head is really gassed up. You know, like think about things in its sum totality. A job, a career. You could wake up tomorrow and literally be laid off. Like people are getting on Elon Musk and all this stress about all the layoffs that are happening. That's how quick and easy, you know, that ego can get deflated. And next thing you know, you're left reassessing what your notion of success is. Like that's why it should always be self-defined.
I concur. And, when I first read that particular passage from Dojo Yuzan, I felt a certain type of way about that. And it was because I guess I'm just so used to seeing this idea of commercial success over everything that I found myself completely and utterly turned off by it. And it wasn't in a way where, because for most people, their understanding of a person's measure and worth, if you're not pursuing that kind of commercial success, then it must mean that you have no discipline, or you're lazy, or you don't have ambition. And I think that this idea of ambition is misappropriated, misplaced, and directed in ways that isn't self-directed, so it's not genuine. And it's difficult to really even talk about that, because what that looks like isn't going to be the same for everybody, but everybody knows what it is when they see it. And so I guess it's
Right.
Example number 9,999, where people are going wrong by trying to compare their progress to other people's, instead of taking the time to understand what it is they need to be doing and what they can be doing. And instead of comparing yourself to other people, comparing yourself to yourself. Overcome and master yourself, and just do better than you did yesterday and stick to that. But
yeah, I mean, because progress should always be looked at as a win, right? I mean, again, dude, like you'll have do you know who Grant Cardone is? Do you know who Grant Cardone? Who that guy is?
No.
He has like this, he's like some real estate guy, and he has these 10x conferences, right? Where the goal is to 10x. You got to 10x.
Oh, I've seen that guy. He's gray hair dude, pretty big.
Yeah, Grant Cardone. Yeah.
So exactly who you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. You see, so you can like get caught up in the success trap where you're listening to people like him. And I'm not like down on the guy or nothing. He has his own philosophy on what success is, right? And he also has a business model. He has a business model in training people on that high volume producer and all this type of shit. You should only be sleeping 2 hours a day, type stuff, right? It's like, and then you got like the sycophants, dude. Like they'll be like, I'm not gonna eat or sleep or poop or nothing until I 10x. You know what I mean? And then
wonder why they get replaced by a robot.
Right.
Okay.
It's like, dude, no. But it works out for Grant, right? Because see, for Grant, all the people that sign up for his conferences, all the people who take his courses and all that. See, so the fact that he's gotten people to buy in, that is success for him, right? And so, it's one thing for him to say, look at me, I'm a success. And he's like, I need all you tools to make that happen, but let's not talk about that, right? Because see, what we're talking about here is, I want you to do it. I want you to get out in the world. And then he gives the whole motivation hack, right? I want you to get out here and you 10x it and this and that. Whereas if you self-define it, dude, it could be success could be something as simple as like saying, I'm gonna get, chores A, B, and C done, or I'm gonna get tasks A, B, and C done. Or that business I've always wanted to start, you know what? I'm actually gonna file some paperwork today to get it started. And then you do it. And that right there is, what they call like a small victory, right? Or like a stepping stone. I mean, see, that's really what success is. Success is just goal setting and goal reaching at the end of the day, right? If you want like where success is fulfilling to you, where you actually are proud of what like, dude, like the stuff I do, man. It may not seem much to a lot of people, dude, but how I kind of came into it and where I'm at now, I'm just like, damn, that's crazy, man. Not a lot of people can say that they did that, and that's something to hang, to hang my hat on, right? So I don't take any of it for granted.
Yeah, and It's just unfortunate because once more, I keep looking at this public education system, and if we understand where these patterns are really being built on, people since 1907 at minimum. So 1907 puts us where the silent generation is getting their parents from, right?
Mhm.
They're coming in on this Rockefeller style public education designed to send you directly to a factory so you can do
Mhm.
a 9 to 5 and die. It's
Yeah.
setting up the school system to get you set for either that or the penitentiary system or a mine or
Right.
some sort of streamlined, pre-automated, crystallized meaning and definition for life, where your sum total value just comes down to the type of consistent check you can bring in benefits. And then that's the foundation. So then there's the idea of not wanting to be a part of the mundane, which is
Mhm.
another form of dystopia waiting to happen, because now to get there, if you don't have the type of personality that's in alignment with this idea of, we're just going to call it the 10x personality, the 10x hustler,
10x.
damn near sociopathic type of being, man. Like you give up being human just to reach this artificial goal that you can't hold on to, and then folks are just dying over stress.
Yep.
And if the entire industry, if the entire business model shifts to that, and you remove things like progress for the sake of profit, if you hyper commoditize things for the sake of efficiency and remove the human element with regard to a lot of these things, man, you lose the soul and the spirit of it all. But people will make the argument that spirit is not making you sales, but not really underpinning the reason why people have to do all of this penny pinching.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean, there's a yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, bro. I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm just speaking to this idea that I'm now being reminded of. I wanted to speak about, called Ikigai, which is talking about life purpose, and all of that. Because if that's truly your passion, if it's your calling, you can work like that and it will never feel like you're working. And that's a cliche point, but it doesn't have to be this mystical experience of I have found my thing. Like, no, it's if you can just recontextualize it to at least be something that you've decided to do for yourself, and not something that you're convincing yourself to cope with because you feel as though you've been coerced into it by an artificial standard that nobody chose to agree to and can find any real life parallel where it matters. I think you get a completely different outcome. You know, there's a part of you again that is choosing to go about doing the things the way you're doing because there's a matter of passion there. I'm sure there's a much more automated, artificial way you could go about doing it, which would technically make you more money. But what you would give up to make that happen would be things like time you have with family, etc., potentially your health, etc. Even some instances compromising your morals because you're doing things that maybe you just don't agree with ethically just to get a sale. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, man, this has a lot to do with like sort of like this. I would say maybe starting. I guess when e-commerce became a thing, right? Back in like the Web 1.0 days, like like late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
You know, the notion of like being able to sell something online or something like that was relatively novel, unless you were somebody that was dibbling and dabbling with HTML and you were building websites and doing all that. And
Yeah, because
kind
the
of,
idea was anything online was suspicious. It was just this
yeah,
grand suspicion that always surrounded it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
not gonna, I'm not gonna put my credit card number in there, you know.
Right.
You know, and then what happened was that you started to see like a new sort of internet entrepreneur class start to break through in the early 2000s, and this was just like any and every person could do it, right? So it became like this race, like this race to get rich using the internet, right? And then if you add to that also reality TV shows, this is all around the same time in the 2000s, right? So,
Yeah,
you
we're
know,
talking 202 to 205, 206.
yeah,
Yeah.
right in that area, dude. So now, you know, you're watching quote unquote reality TV, right? MTV Cribs and all this type of stuff. And so now everybody's even feeling the pinch even more. So, oh, I gotta raise my status up. I gotta get like these people, right? Because now I'm getting a peek into how, you know, I maybe imagine how they live, but now it's in my face. Oh yeah, welcome to my crib. Remember MTV Cribs? Welcome to my crib. You know, it's just like this huge empty rented mansion, and it's like, oh yeah, here's the pool, and that's my kitchen, and you know, it's like this huge pool, and it's like a waterfall and all this, and everybody's just sitting there like, bro, I ain't doing nothing in life. And so that rat
They
race.
find out most of that stuff was rented.
It was rented. That's what I'm doing. This is the point I'm getting to, man.
Right.
It's like a lot of the stuff, people's notions of success, what's successful, and all. Dude, it's a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. And a lot of the people that that people envy, and they think, dude, like these people are miserable inside. You know, they're miserable. I mean, I won't get off into the puff stuff, but like, dude, just let there be a modicum of that must be true. And it's just like, wait, you mean to tell me you literally did that in order to get on, in order to, like, oh my God.
That's how numb some people can be.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea that you were mentioning earlier about small incremental victory. That's the whole idea of Kaizen, you know, incremental improvements over time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how they've been able to show and prove that your willpower can grow as a result of that, especially when you're doing things that you kind of want to resist. So like if you can employ a measure of delayed gratification and you know it's something, a goal that you do want to attain, and you go about it little by little, you know, segment by segment, you regiment it out, you practice discipline, you get better and better at resisting the nonsense and being able to focus on getting those harder parts done that may be less appealing. I mean, I'm working on my cybersecurity training right now, and it's the same sort of deal, but it's feeding off of all of this intellectual inertia I have from other things that I instill. It's that willpower muscle. But if you don't have a kind of connection to that, you know, if you don't have a sort of bigger picture in mind, and you've just vicariously lived through other people kind of using these things, you can see how hollow this stuff gets eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see is groups of people just coming up with counter coping mechanisms to say, well, you know, you don't agree with it because you can't have it. And then the next question has to be, well, who benefits from people operating on this type of frequency? And obviously it's the few people that keep wanting to sell you. And this ends up looking more so like a kind of fear rather than doing something out of love. You'd be surprised how many people work their asses off as a trauma response to try to get a lot of the things they have. I see this a lot with people.
Yeah.
A lot with people. And I'm not going to say it's pitiable, but it's unfortunate to observe, because that spirit is easily passed on to children. It dampens the mood of who you try to and want to work with. You understand what I'm saying? It more importantly, it creates an air that stifles creativity. And I think that's really my issue that I charge to all of that. By putting profit in front of progress, it inhibits the capacity for creation, or it limits it in a very specific vector so aggressively that it denatures what it is you're even doing. And for me, the action becomes more so contemptible than anything else, even if, maybe there's some lucrative undertone behind it all. It's unfortunate, man. And it's people blame corporatization on that, but I don't think a corporation has to be that way. I think people are just making it that way.
No, they don't. Like, right? Corporations. What did Mitt Romney famously say? Corporations are people, my friend. Right. So he's basically saying that corporations are made up of people. They have a thing called corporate culture, right? And that's sort of like the culture of the corpse or that body, that like corp, right? That could be benevolent. It could be very friendly. Like they could have different like business models, like where there's like it's employee owned, there's profit sharing, stuff like that, where there takes more of like a positive, we all benefit from the collective work we put in type of situation, right? I would imagine psychologically, it makes it easier for people like go to work in places like that, right? Versus say like the opposite, where you have to like literally like drag yourself into a place that you don't want to be at. Like your skin crawls being there, your boss sucks, right? You're like morale's bad, profits are down this quarter. You know what I mean? And so what's their answer to that? Their answer to that is work harder.
Simply put. I get that too, though. So, the whole idea, the creed I put behind the nameless swordsman, resolute acceptance of death, endure through struggle, and find meaning through conflict. There's a whole philosophy behind that I'm calling Genkai-mitsu, or it translates literally to limit destruction. I revel in obliterating things I used to do before and seeing new plateaus I can reach. The key to it is I decided to do that rather than I'm deciding to do that under a form of coercion that has been accepted, that has been collectively given a consensus to allow for yourself to be coerced because money's involved.
Right.
That's the part that sickens me. And it's the same thing for assisting help. At risk of digressing the point slightly, I wanted to really assert that point of there's a portion of agency involved in that. When that's done outside of self-generated inertia, it's a kind of dystopian BS, man. I can't.
Do you remember that movie? It came out, I think it was either like in 99 or 2000. Do you remember that movie Office Space?
With the dude in the basement mumbling.
Yeah, with the red stapler.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, the dude with the red stapler. Yeah, man. So like that was kind of like basically the main point of that movie was the same thing, dude. Like all the dudes that were working there, right, were unfulfilled. You know what I mean? They all hated their jobs and stuff. And the one dude that drove the Porsche with the glasses, what was his name? I'm trying to remember the guy who he was like he owned the business. Hey, he was living life on the hog, man. He was screwing Jennifer Aniston, right, his employee. I guess the hot chick there, driving a Porsche, owns the business, right? Everybody working for him hates the place.
Yep. Sounds like a vampire if I ever saw one.
I mean, seriously. Yeah.
But we got Jay Moore up here, fam. What's good, fam? Go ahead.
What's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, you guys? How you guys doing? One thing that actually kind of sweet. One thing that bugs me is like when I was a little kid, I used to ask my parents and adults figures. It was like when I asked them, like, so you're saying we're printing money, right? So what's gonna stop us from printing? Like, how? So is everything just fake? So what's the point of us doing all this work and stuff? It just seems like we're doing all this stuff to get to nowhere in life. Like, what's the point of doing all this stuff? And the best answer they could give me was a punishment.
What? For being boring?
Like just I was like, yo, I'm trying to figure out like how the society works and everything. I'm asking them like straight up questions like, what's the point of doing anything if like you put only just money behind it? Then does that really mean like it had any meaning in the first place? Like what is going on here? Like I just kept on asking them questions to really was like understand what's going on, but they didn't like the fact that I was making their life seem, like I was just questioning their whole life existence. So
I
What
mean,
you mean
yeah,
it's more to life than money? What you mean, cuz?
yeah.
I'm like, yo, I always asked for just comfort in throughout my whole entire life since I was a kid. I was like, I just wanted to be comfortable. Like, and my comfortable was just like, I just want my want my piece of land. I want to raise my goats, my chickens, and have me maybe enough money to feed some of my hobbies. But other than that, I don't care. I don't want all that fancy diamonds, golds, all that extra stuff. I just want the basic little bit of life that I can and enjoy it. And it's like, isn't that a little bit too little? Like, no, I'm cool. I've always
Well,
been good by myself.
what's interesting, man, is that um, the Earth is a very, very big place, right? And you can pretty much, as crazy as this sounds, you can pretty much live how you want to live, right? It really becomes a matter of, and this goes back to that whole notion of us kind of questioning, well, who determines what success is? See, so you say, well, I want this. It may not seem, it doesn't need to be a whole bunch. It's not this. It's just a. Now, if you acquired it, would you view yourself as a success?
Yeah, because that would be my goal. My,
That
I actually made it.
exactly. Not. It's not because it was grandiose, right? You
Yeah.
said like, hey, I want something simple. I just want this, 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 this. And if you get that, you're chilling. And see,
Hmm.
so and again, this was like what we were talking about, like um, you know, this over embellishment of things, man. People uh complicate their lives way too much by doing this. They say, what is it called? Keeping up with the Joneses,
Hmm.
right? That's a bad way. Um, that's a bad way to live. But we live in a hyper capitalist. We have a hyper capitalist economy, right? See, so we do a lot of debt spending here.
Hmm.
Credit is relatively easy to come by, and there's no shortage of shit to buy, whether it's on Amazon, Walmart, Temu, you name it, dude, wherever the hell, right? So there's plenty of exchange taking place, and for the sake of economic reasons and what have you, they don't want that to stop. So even if you could politically have conservatives voted in, do you think that they're then gonna like slow down the type of purchasing and spending that's going on? It props up local economies and stuff. Hell no, right? See, so there's like there's all these different forces at play, and really it just comes down to your own conscious decision to say, well, how much of myself am I going to give to all of that?
Hmm.
Right? That's a self-determined thing.
And I think that's so interesting now because the paradox is with the fourth industrial revolution, fam, I really think we're heading head first into UBI. And with that,
Um,
a fundamental rethinking on what in the world life means for people. I think we
Hmm.
got a taste of it with COVID, but I really think people are going to have to be brought face to face with themselves and asked, what in the world, who in the world are you? And what do you want? What actually gives you fulfillment? And
but
I don't think human beings have had a long time to really figure that out yet in the last 2,000 years.
Nameless. You ever, what was it called? Just think about if you had the power, right, to to snap everybody else to a different world, into a different society or so, and like how would you make it and everything? Like I was just saying, I was thinking like, yo, if that was ever possible, one thing I would just do is just make sure the whole society is still able to function a little bit, but is no, teach everybody, hey, this is what you got to do to make such and such role. So they have their own roles, but they have their own lives to build up onto whatever they want to do. Because I'm just like, if we just keep going by the way how the system is right now, life is meaningless. There's nothing to do. There's nothing really spread on. And you're saying stuff about like, you know, the what's it called when they put all this money into like a certain art, there's only or a certain thing, it's only certain stuff that's going to come out of it. It's not going to actually be a true expression of itself and everything like that. We're not going to get the true beauty of it or the true essence of it. And I'm just thinking that, you know, like the way how everything is going now is just like, if we, I mean, not, you know, if everything stay at the course it is right now, this bad state is just, people just gonna end up ending themselves. It's just like they're gonna wake up and realize I'm in the matrix. This is bullshit. Why am I doing this shit? And there's no other, you know, no other way out. They're just gonna done themselves. And the way how you're doing is just like the only way to probably snap everybody back into two is actually getting them one with, you know, nature and other things, what they want to do with their families and everything like that, just to, you know, fix it. I think everything will, you know, bounce back. But you do that.
So you were talking about the capacity to like if you had the ability to terraform society in an image of what you believe would leave it better than what it is now, is the vision you were sharing just now with that. We'll pause on that complex. Go ahead with what you were going to say. Sorry. I ended up cutting you off.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was gonna. It wasn't like direct. It was just something that he said, kind of, you know, made me kind of bring up just the whole kind of 4IR, right, time period we're in. You know, I would say for maybe like the last, since the onset of 4G connectivity, cellular connectivity, from the onset, something like around like 2010-ish, right, where basically every phone became a smartphone, right? Every phone had a touch screen, and every phone had basically the ability to run apps on the device, right? So ever since we got thrust into that period of tech and connectivity, this is where we've kind of gotten hyper tuned, you know, via algorithm and, you know, AI learning models and shit like that, where during the 4G era, our inputs was teaching real rudimentary AI models and stuff, right? Like, so for example, group like a search, right? You say, hey, I want to know something about this, and then it spits back, you know, what it finds, right? And things get more sophisticated. Now you could talk to it, and then it'll spit back what you asked, right? And so just like that, we just jumped, what, 13, 14 years to now, 2025, right? You can talk to the AIs, they talk back. You go into fast food restaurants, there's a giant touchscreen. You know what I mean? Like, we're being thrust into this stuff. And, you know, as somebody who's raising, I got a teenage daughter, she's 13, right? And, you know, I'm seeing the onset of this stuff. I work in, you know, micromobility in the IoT sector, right? I know what this stuff's capable of. You know, I'm very, very, very mindful, man, of how she's soaking all this shit in, right? And so I work to like have a balance with her. Like we garden also. So just kind of speak to what you were saying about nature and what have you. We're not going to really be able to get away from technology like that. But again, we can make conscious decisions to engage with nature so that we have a balance. You know, because the technology is going to get more and more and more sophisticated. So you just get sucked more and more and more into it, or do you learn and understand the key components, right, of these advancements, but still know how to like grow your own food and shit? You know what I mean?
I do. And that's why I'm pulling up this chart, because fundamentally what the fourth industrial revolution permits is an efficacy of energy. So less energy is required to start addressing, especially those bottom two floors. But what the fourth IR and those technologies subsequently can't address specifically independently is everything else starting on that third floor going up. Are you guys able to see the chart here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's There is no such
Yes.
replacement for belonging and love. Like you just can't. And
Mm-hmm.
we already started seeing this getting omitted in the value system when people made the turn of the century and started really doubling down on not the turn of this century, but the century before last. So 20th century, getting into the 20th century, it was a problem because love and belonging was assumed, esteemed was assumed. Everything else was something you aspired for. But at some point, that assumption became seen as a liability in a lot of instances. And if you still have both parents there, you just the quality of that, the efficacy of being able to provide that third level
Mm-hmm.
began to show as unintended consequences as people began to adapt in a way that left them. It favored people who didn't have an inclination towards these things. So remember when we were saying earlier about the people who are all about 10xing?
Yeah.
You can see that there's a slow progression of artificial selection, not artificial, it's a kind of ultimate sexual/natural selection of individuals who can be sociopathic and exist without needing as much of this here. As long as they can figure this out on their own and acquire
Yeah.
this by consuming other people, which is what I see. This becomes a parasitic modality rather than a symbiotic or synergetic modality. It's
Mm-hmm.
parasitic in nature. It uses that to catapult itself to these other realms.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I see happening. So, as an adaptation, people hyper focus on these bottom two here. They set their definition of success on these two levels, specifically and especially this. And in having an overabundance of that, they consume other people to acquire these things rather than become an embodiment of it and offer it and acquire it in turn. They consume these.
Yeah. And
And
there's been a systematic chipping away at that third one, and I'm talking about like vis-a-vis like media,
right.
right? You know what I mean? Like television programming, music, radio programming. You know, like listen to the language I'm using, right? Programming. Um, and again, man, it seems as though the chipping away or the breaking down of that third one, like it. Let's just say this: like the rate at which that took place has basically gone in stride with the rate of technological advancement in terms of connectivity, right? I'm talking about
I
through
agree.
like high speed internet and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like,
Information, and in turn energy as the mitigating, not so much a mitigating factor, but the enabler of these things and the exploit.
yeah,
Because I really do think humans are still stuck in the Paleolithic era as far as our sophistication is concerned. I don't think we've solved the Paleolithic question. How do you inspire civilization outside of the family for safety exchange between men and women?
you said, wait, say that again.
I don't think the Paleolithic question has been answered, which is, and well, it's probably better I type it out. Hold on a second.
And my dog kind of came out here and gave me the side eye, man. I got about 5 more minutes.
Oh, so you getting daughter aggro?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know what?
I gotta sleep more or something. So
It's all good. I can actually save that conversation for tomorrow because it's part of the political Mandalorian doctrine.
oh yeah, yeah.
Going over tomorrow. I'm doing the whole.
Yeah, I know you've been itching. Yeah, I know you've been itching to get this one done.
Oh yeah.
I'm talking about for tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm breaking down the appendixes. And this is part of a theory, I guess, that goes along with it that I'm calling the modality of human civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I've just identified patterns within human civilization that just repeat themselves over and over again. And I think it's the reason for the gender war. I think it's the the reason for all of this mess we see going on. It's why the space is here. It's all connected, and it's a very simple thing.
That's kind of what I was hinting at, man.
Yeah,
but I was saying, like when you look at the chipping away of that shit, it's like, man, you know, and then you look at what the algorithm pushes on people.
Yep.
Like
they just doomed you down this path. They just gave you like a, what was it called? Just one narrow path just to go down to it. Both sides are just covered by bricks.
What it is that it's the wrong approach to a quote unquote. It's the wrong solution for a problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the problem's legitimate, and the symptoms are legitimate too. It's just the order of operations people are using to try to solve it is not.
That's not it. That's not it.
And the other thing, they're just trying to avoid they know what the problem is. They're just trying to avoid it. They're trying to trick you or make us all believe into like that's not the issue. Just avoid that. Everything else is good.
Well, let me present to you not even an ultimatum, but a challenge to consider. Take a look at the entire intersectional portfolio and the way civil rights has been leveraged to justify that particular political frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at transhumanism in its totality, in its full total.
Yeah.
Imagine go full Star Trek. What happens to that entire philosophy of racial Marxism? What happens to it?
Well,
in the face of transhumanism, go ahead.
What happens is it becomes a dead modality at some point because see, transhumanism, that's a whole. See, that's the Rubicon, bro. That's the new Rubicon right there. See, so once you step into the new shit, bro, it's like you out with the old, in with the new, right?
It has no purchase. Like what? Bam, go ahead. I didn't want to.
No, I was laughing, dude. Go ahead.
You ever watch the show The Expanse?
No.
It's basically like what's called Earth, you know, what's it called, use up a lot of their stuff. They end up going, sending people over to Mars and the astro belt. The people on Mars is like, hey, we want to make this our own. They separated themselves from Earth, and now they're going at each other. And then the people on the belt are kind of caught in the middle. All this other, basically, it just seems like the way how things
sounds
are going.
Like Destiny 2 story.
Probably it is actually.
Sounds just like Destiny 2's lore. But yeah, go ahead.
But then it was like either or. It's like I'm still getting into the show. It's actually kind of interesting to me, but it just sounds like we're gonna get to what's it called? Say we're gonna get the technology to go up into space or do this transhumanism stuff, but then we're gonna split off into like what's it called? Like lions and tigers and leopards and shit, just different branches of human beings. It seems like the way how they're gonna go.
But there's a robot, there's a humanoid bot. You got to look at the in betweens also. Like they'll come out with like robotic appendages and stuff, right? See now you'll have cyborgs. It's like you're gonna have a mix of stuff. The undergirding part is
so it's basically 40K Warhammer 40K. You're saying we're gonna end up like?
I'm not sure what that is.
Well, look, yes and no. Consider this, and this is the high point I'm making here. If you take a look at Title VII in the civil rights legislation, right, you've got all of these protected classes. My point is, when you put it side by side with transhumanism, those classes largely become redundant and end up losing gravity with the weight that the transhumanist conversation will place, because the only framework to resolve any of these issues that are going to be a problem in society is with the civil rights model. And It would have to go into Title VII protections, which at that point, you end up being in the same position Black men ended up in, where what's considered left suddenly becomes right, because someone can dial a few switches on an interface and your skin tone is irrelevant because you can make it whatever you want it to be.
Well, I'll just say this, man, and I got to take off. But that's why the final boss in all this conversation was to get people to basically see themselves. They don't see gender. You know, they were literally like just mass programming of minds to say there's more than two genders, right?
You get to unhinge from the binary
Like that's what I mean. So
organization.
you have to literally detach from sort of like say root root um nature learnings, let's just say, right? See, so like when a baby is born, okay, that little cub, that little kitten, puppy, whatever the hell it is, or actual baby, knows mommy from daddy.
Right.
It knows that, dude, fresh out the womb, okay, bun out the oven, right?
Yep.
But so I, you gotta understand like the root level of programming that has to happen, dude, to literally erase that,
And that's my
or to
point.
throw some sort of code in to scramble the brain computer so that it doesn't recognize like very primal things like understanding mommy from daddy, right? I feed from mommy. She has breast, right? Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, dude, this shit is wild, man. But
And
hey,
then you consider,
oh, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
okay. Yeah, you consider the things like the C-sections going on right now, so the breastfeeding isn't happening, or them getting a natural birth, which isn't exposing them to the proper microbiome that they should be getting. Then you
Yeah.
look at their early interface and access to the algorithm, exacerbating the very point you're talking about. Like these this is what I'm talking about, man. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
transhumanism upends the conversation in a way that it creates a hilarious situation where what's left becomes right by definition.
By default, dude, it just becomes the de facto.
By
Like,
definition, it
like,
becomes absurd.
jeez.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, man. Hey, I got
I
a
know you
steak.
got
I
to
got a
bounce
steak.
back.
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna pull up on you tomorrow, though, man.
All right, man. Look forward to tomorrow. That's gonna be the big one, man. I'm gonna be up here
All
for
right,
a
for
while
sure.
tomorrow. Man, have a good one. Peace.
All right, man. Hey, bro. Hey,
Stay
take it
blessed
easy,
out
man.
here. You
All
too,
Us.
right,
man.
you
Stay
too, man.
blessed.
Peace. Oh.
But yeah. So Jay Moore, what
Mm.
what caught your attention in anything we've chopped it up about so far? We were getting earlier on the Precept 18. We got into the idea of success and then branched off into really drawing a line between commercial success and meaningful accomplishment in a way that provides personal development and fulfillment.
It was more about success, or like what is the like meaning of success, because I kind of just, when you were speaking about it, was just I was looking at my situation, my cousin's situation and stuff like that, and I was just looking at, like, especially like when it came to my cousin, him, with his goals when it comes to music and stuff like that. And I mean, like, he loves the art and everything, he does the art, but it just, sometimes I look at him like, you also do want the, what was it called, the fame, the notoriety, and all that other stuff with it. So is it truly, like, what is your main goal? Like, is it the art form, or is it the money, or do you want, like, or is it the money that's going to make confirm that this art form is actually good or not? Like, I was just, what I'm saying, like, it's one of those things going on.
That's
Like,
a
what is
good point.
success?
It's the piece, it's the validation piece you're speaking about.
Mm,
And who is someone to judge what an individual attempting to pursue the pinnacle of a craft looks like?
mm-hmm.
And what's paradoxical about it is it tends to be that people who do reach that pinnacle rarely get recognized for it.
Mm-hmm. And then, like, the other thing too, do you really want to get recognized? Because maybe you being recognized is not even a good thing in the first place, because it's just like you were never supposed to be recognized, but now, because they're putting you in the spotlight, now they're using you as a, conduit for whatever device or something that could be
Oh, the
evil or
Tesla
good, either
effect.
way. You
The
know what I'm saying?
Tesla
Yeah,
effect.
exactly. Hmm.
Yeah, because Tesla made all of these innovative things, although, the commercial piece we were talking about before, the whole progress for profit thing got in the way. But Edison's a textbook example of what you're talking about. He did what he tried to do to solve what he viewed, and I agree with, is the human issue with society and, well, civilization really, which is energy. If you solve for energy, you get rid of 50% of the problem out the gate. The other half is solving for empathy, in my opinion. But if you address at least the energy piece, you give people enough time to potentially consider being empathetic because they don't have to worry about being in scarcity mode. But then you run into the paradoxical issue of, if people don't know what to do with themselves now that they have time, they may find themselves in despair. So this is why I pin this as being an issue that started in the Paleolithic era, because that's when I think human beings stopped evolving in the rawest biological sense, and we're just calibrating and taking over, or rather carrying with us, all the problems we had in the Paleolithic era. It's just we've got all this technology now to mask it. But the more sophisticated the technology is, the more it's revealing all of those problems we've had from way back then, it seems like.
Yeah, but you know what? The other part to it seems like to me that is like we need to move on from certain things, but like the way how I guess the Leviathan or whatever, the government or whoever's behind this whole thing wants to just drag this out. Like how one thing I noticed about the Chinese and us was different. The Chinese actually open up a lot of their technology so everybody could try and make it better or do whatever with it. But while we just kind of milk off a lot of certain technology, and it stifles us. And the same thing when it comes to music, like rap. Like one thing I was just like, I was said since I was a kid, I'm like, there's only so much you could write about or rap about. Like, I mean, like there's certain things you can, but it's at a certain point, you guys already said it all. It's time to either find a different new format or some other way to express it or something. You got to move on from it, or, change it up some way that it doesn't remain the same, because you can't stay stagnant. That's how, mosquitoes come out and it'll suck you dry.
That goes back to the idea of holding back progress for profit.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that's the core of it all. And I've stated before, this is my subjective opinion.
Before you continue,
oh yeah, go
before
ahead.
You continue, I just want to, like, it just hit me. You ever heard about like how birds used to sound before, back in the day, before like what's it called, the cars and everything like that?
No.
Like birds used to have their own different dialects and the way how they mating calls and stuff, and birds used to like practice every day. Certain birds used to practice every day to make their tweets sound a little unique, to make it like their own melodies and everything like that. But then when cars and planes and all stuff came in, because it's so loud and it covers up their stuff, now they all start just squawking like all the time instead of making them individual, because it used to be a beautiful thing until all this stuff came in and clutter it up and mask the sound. That's what I was going to with it, because if you get where I was going with that.
Well, that sounds like human beings leaving an unintended consequence on the natural environment due to the Industrial Revolution, because that's first era Industrial Revolution technology you're describing right there. And yeah, I mean,
that's what's going on now.
That same thing, I'm gonna finish this point and you can go ahead. The same thing has happened to lead to a lot of different species going extinct as well. Go ahead, Fam.
And I was saying, this is like the reason why I'm bringing that up too is an analogy of what's going on now. There's a lot of there used to be a beauty in all the art. Like, if you go, the older you get, you just see like the different details in people's painting, the music, the details of soul in it, you can feel it. But then because of all this new technology and all this other stuff, it's stifling it, and it's mucking, it's loud. It's just, it's not letting you, what's it called, be free, or free in the silence, or free in the peace of nature and all that stuff. Is all of this stuff basically changed because of the first industrial wave, like you're talking about, because music used to be better and stuff like that too, or it did advance, but until they stifled it all. So
we know about the 440 scale and how that was intentionally interfered with, but the actual core music from the street, the actual music you saw from especially our demographic in jazz clubs when we created funk and disco, that was never the issue. That became an issue 86 when you get, again, the people who are there for profit stifling the progress because they wanted to profit off of it. and they put it up there thinking it wasn't going to do anything. And when they found out the formula works, you get Al Green. Was it Al Green or Bob Dole? One of those two. I think their wife came up with that whole idea of quote unquote gangster rap, and they hijacked it all to a specific direction. And the same usual suspects swooped in and found ways of capitalizing on it. And so when they made that commoditized formula for it, that's where a lot of that redundancy came in. But you still had people, especially throughout the 90s, find ways of pushing back against that, just because the sheer overwhelming flow of talent was sucked, though, is after 2001-ish, a lot of that stuff did slow down. But I don't want to digress that point too much, because I think more of it, I want to highlight the bigger picture here of the Industrial Revolution back in, we're going to say 1880-ish to World War II, and then entering into the electric age by the 60s and 70s, and the internet age by the time we hit the late 80s, mid 90s, and 2000s, to the social media era, which is opening the gate for the fourth industrial revolution and now show up. I think as our ability to transfer information gets more sophisticated, once more, a lot of those older patterns from the Paleolithic era keep rearing their head. And there's less and less time for the society and the culture to really respond to a lot of these things, to come up with meaningful solutions, because they're happening so fast. It's already old by the time you come up with an answer that's meaningful. You know, it takes time to pass that on to kids. It takes time to see the societal end result of that down the line. And if we're continually left with this disproportionate invasion on, I'm going to say, the male modality, because at this point, technology has disproportionately made redundant a lot of roles that men were supposed to perform. If the expectation is still to produce a traditional product, but you haven't provided incentive for the rising cost of men to justify their existence, you're going to run into a lot of these problems just out the gate.
Yeah, you're right. The way how they're doing stuff right now is pushing men out, and they don't got an answer for it. They really don't have an answer for any of it. And it's just like, yo, we built this whole entire thing, and now you want us to die to maintain this thing that doesn't even benefit us. And if we try to change it, it's wrong. And if we don't change it, we're wrong. It is no winning at all.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, someone earlier mentioned the Mouse Utopia experiment, and it's right on cue. But the problem is, half of the issue is if you do talk about it, it's complaining. And if you do something about it, you will become the villain that you were raised not to be. So
yeah,
I'm definitely going to touch on this way more tomorrow. But, you know, this is just one of those many side effects I see where, again, the technology, which is key to all of this, has irrevocably changed things and exposed the original contract and demonstrated an imbalance in contract making. Like you can't hold men in general to produce traditional products, but you're not in the environment that produced that traditional outcome, and you're actively punishing these dudes for attempting to do that.
And then if you call it out, you're a freaking terrorist or something. You're something bad. They want to put some type of weird word on it just to make you seem like some bad person.
And the key vector that's being attacked by is anytime men want to reclaim that, it's seen as a threat to female safety, which is the other part of that contract. So again, the trade-off is supposed to be men providing safety and expecting family in return, and women getting safety and providing that family in turn. And all the rites of passage essentially training men to provide that safety and preparing women to provide that family means. Family suddenly became optional when technology can serve as a proxy for that safety, especially when you've got states that are organizing aggressively around that. So that the idea of balance now ends up being you've introduced entropy into the system by making it to where the only way you can get a balance is if you take away aspects of what are defined as safety now. Because what was taken away was the promise for family, or the potential, the reasonable expectation for that family, and everything that it's oriented around. So you as a dude asking for something traditional instantly places you in the regressive slot. And it's regressive in a way to where it's a hostile regressive. So now you're a problem that has to be dealt with. And that's where the vilification comes in. Go ahead, fam.
This is where I was saying to even my own family, they always go against what I was saying. Like, when I point out this, I'm like, this is how you know this society don't give a damn about men. When there's no repercussions or anything for the fact that a woman could lie and send you to jail over false allegations and all that stuff. And they got all this stuff. They could take a DNA test and all this other stuff to prove that you didn't do it, but they don't do it at all.
But
And you get touched in jail. There's no repercussions.
And here's where we fuck up royally. And going back to what the brother was saying in the video, we didn't advocate for our own power, especially and in particularly when our demographic went from being flat black to it having a gender affix place to it. The fact that speaking about gender is by de facto now a political modality, everything has become a matter of policy and war. Everything out the gate. And we were the only ones that didn't get the memo. And it's not a matter of hostility. I'm going to remind people, the object of war is to compel others to your will. And your will is the policy with which you and whatever entity you represent aspire to, especially in a state where negotiation and diplomacy is impossible or has failed. And that's where we're at with it. Yeah, but go ahead and finish your statement. I want to jump to these questions that are in the chat too, because I don't want them to sit there too long. No, it's all good. Go ahead, fam.
I'm saying, like, even I said to my cousin, like, dude, we were born into a war that you didn't even know about, and either you're refusing to understand it, or you just want to go along with the bullshit, because it's like, I'm not even trying to make I wasn't trying to be hyperbolic. I was just calling it out for what it is. The way how it is like, dude, they're against men, and you need to stand up. And it's really men's fault to a certain degree, because you're not standing up for your stuff either. You won't just say, put your foot down either.
Well, that's the issue. You don't want to confront this like a jester would and quote, speak truth to power. What we need to do is assume that power. And I'm gonna be real with you. Well, that's just it. We haven't. Let me put it to you like this: the majority of people in this space, if they knew what they know now when they were younger, they likely would have put themselves in position to aggressively pursue power from the very beginning. And the reason why a lot of people didn't is because they were under the false pretense that everything was okay, that there was people there that gave a damn and everything was cool. And when they find out that just ultimately wasn't the case, they realize they never developed the tools to deal with and cope with that, which means forming trust to be able to organize, form groups, establish and do business, and move forward off the strength of that. And unfortunately, that's where we're at. We're left with trying to use the tools that were given to us, which are the tools that Frederick Douglass gave us, that W.E.B. Du Bois gave us, which is petitioning for power rather than having the leverage to either take it or apply proxy power to give whatever it is we need. And that's a skill set. And it requires doing things that essentially has been classified as making us villains. Like who has to listen to what we say and ask for? Nobody. And it should make people uncomfortable that we're probably one of the only demographics that nobody's really afraid to do anything to, because there's no true consequence. And if they are concerned, it's because there's other things that are adjacent to us that they'll be concerned with. That didn't happen overnight.
They did, but the other thing too, don't forget, is that our women is stifling our power too.
No. Wait. That's what I'm talking about with the with Title VII, when gender became a modality of separation. It isn't that they're stifling anything. They're doing what they've always done. It's just we aren't doing what we're supposed to be doing. Like, I think we've covered ad nauseum that piece. At the end of the day, that only goes as far as we permit it to. And again, I think we head most of the stuff off if we understand from the very beginning that we are at a state of war out the gate. And that if you don't have your own ability to assert yourself and establish vectors of influence, you're going to end up being subject to all of this stuff. And you're going to lose out to the system and be just like the brother we heard talking earlier. You'll have all of this talent. You'll have all the things that you have, and you'll get by off of lottery and charity, which is pretty much the disproportionate, overwhelming majority of our current condition right now. And it doesn't have to be this way. But Jay, let me pause you real quick. Rael came up. Let me get these two questions and then we'll jump to that point. Hold on, let me find them real fast. Okay. Brother Onk asked another question. What does a truly transcendent culture look like and feel like, especially when self-actualization is considered subjective? This is where you get the cultures themselves needing to define what that even means. And I still stand on, I could just offer my subjective opinion, but that's a question that the cultures themselves have to actually answer. And it's answered in really asking the question if they want self-actualization and transcendence, like if they really want that. And you just have to be at a certain point to be on that wavelength, because if you're still on the commodified level and you haven't figured out how to not be parasitic with esteem, love, and belonging, then you're nowhere near ready to get to the self-actualization point, because you can't sustain that. If you don't have all of those other prior floors handled on default, you'll never be able to sustain the high intense energy that's required for self-actualization. It'll be just as hollow and then end up defaulting back, because you'll never be able to establish the trust needed to maintain that, which it sucks. And that's pretty much the trap we're headed towards, because what fuels that is empathy. And then the last question real quick. Do you think the male modality becoming obsolete was intentional? I think it may be a little bit of column A and column B, but what people didn't account for was how fast technology can change things. And in the space of that change, not putting something back to replace what you took away, I don't think they expected that to have the kind of consequences that it has, which for most men is either withdrawal or aggression. And I think that the crash outs that are happening globally are happening now and not when they probably should have, because we have things like pornography and video games. I think those have been pressure release valves to really stave that off. We could have had a way worse case scenario by now, but I think those are pressure valves kind of stemming that off.
You know, God forbid somebody touch that Xbox.
Man, it'd be ugly.
Now,
But
Rael is those videos? You seen those videos of those people?
Oh yeah, with the parent will come in and take the Xbox away, and the kid be ready to kill the parents.
Nah, with the relationships, the girlfriend does it, and he was like, he really thinks about, you know, killing her or getting rid of her so quickly.
Oh, I mean, that's the same scenario.
Yeah, same thing. It's all funny, just funny as all ever. Man. But sorry,
Rael's up, man. What's good with you, fam? If you still there,
Ropes, man, peace.
Peace.
I've kind of done some stuff on this masculinity thing, because it is truly, I think it's really the defining issue, especially when you talk about it in American context. It's very interesting because on the one hand, you're talking about one of the greatest powers that's ever existed on Earth, but at the same time, you're having to question whether it's a masculine entity from an institutional body perspective. I would actually say that America, as a whole, is not a masculine country at all. I would say that it has the capacity to project masculine power in the form of like a military, but on a social level, I think the projection of it really truly is more feminine, and so even when it comes to the military itself, there and I'm pretty sure you've seen this, Nameless, because you've been in there. I went to boot camp at one point, so you see that there are many guys who go through the basic training, who go through all of the things that are set up to actually build a more masculine man, but you see a lot of dudes who still have a more effeminate posture, even within the military confine, which is something that you really would never expect to witness. And so I think that, and this is why I'm doing something else covering masculinity, because I think it's been so I think it's been so abandoned. It's that, and I said something to a dude I used to be cool with that was in the NOI years ago. That, you know, we had a disagreement, and I said to him, the man in you does not have a problem with the things that I say, but it's the bitch inside of you that has a problem. I said, because when I speak on the behalf like of men. Like I don't, I really hate to see, true men get really shafted out here. I said, and that's what I speak to. I said, and in speaking to that, I have to address the females who are out here doing those types of things to those particular types of men. I said, but you got to figure out how to get that bitch inside of you out. Now, why did I have to say that to this dude? I had to say that to this dude because this dude, everything that he was doing in his life was trying to appease or please his mother, because he had a real heavy mother complex. And so we ended up falling out because I would always push the masculine projection. And it used to be funny that, somebody who was literally raised in the nation be offended by that. Like it was the weirdest thing I ever seen in my life. But it's a microcosm of really what it is out here in society. Like there is the feigning of masculine projection, but really behind it, what you see is a lot of effeminate behavior from men. You see it on the political level to the point that like males in government have thrown men in society under the bus and hide behind females to actually fight their battles against more capable leading type of men. And I think that's why people are gravitating to people like an Andrew Tate or something like that, because there is a something within inside of men that knows that he might not have all the answers on certain things, but the talking of or the elevating of the masculine, principle, even if it's coming from somebody like that, is proof that like there is a thirst and a hunger there. And I just think that it's never going to correct itself until the masculine is brought back into its proper place, not to be in subservience to the feminine, but to be complemented by the feminine. And right now, what you see is more of a society that wants masculinity to be subservient to the feminine principle, and that's never going to work. And I just really think that really is what's at play here. That the masculine is really out of its orbit, it's out of its place, and things that you see happening to men. When I was younger, man, men was something that you feared. Like men were not something like you playing around with, things like that. And now you see men just basically get toyed with in society overall. And then when you actually speak force speak with force as a man, what you see a lot of times is not just so much pushback from females. I would argue that you get actually more pushback from males when you actually project masculinity, because that's the thought modality that reigns supreme. It's the more effeminate side of things, which goes back into some of the stuff Nameless was talking about regarding the title stuff, and the gender stuff. There is a imbalance in terms of how masculinity is positioned and viewed upon in society, and how it's not getting this proper due. And until you rectify that situation, you're only going to see what you're going to see out here, or it gets worse.
So, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I have to make a abrupt pause, only because I didn't realize it's been 2 hours and 17 minutes already. That lunar event's happening right now, so I gotta take care of another engagement with that. But I want to pause on that. Rael, tomorrow I'm going in on political Mandalorianism. I'm completing the entire doctrine, the preamble, both appendixes, everything, even the stuff we didn't even talk about yet. And there's a second appendix that I'm going to be covering. See if you can come up, and I want to pick up exactly where you left off, because I'm dealing with that very point you just made in it. That very, very point.
Okay. What time tomorrow? What time tomorrow?
It's posted up there, so it should be 6:30 our time.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I got it posted up already.
All right.
But fam, on that note, Jay Moore, if you got anything else, go ahead and close out. And we'll go ahead and pause for the evening.
Oh, I'm heading your direction this weekend too, Names.
Okay, bet. Just hit me up.
All right.
This is a great show. Nameless. Stay blessed out here. Stay safe out here.
Oh, absolutely, man. Anytime you're in the area, man, go ahead and pull up.
Got you, sir.
All right, man. To the chat. Os. To the founders of the space. Os. To the dojo and the members of the playback. Os. This is a nameless protagonist. I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. This has been Moonlight Blade Meditations with the nameless protagonist.